Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Profit Builder. I'm Vicki Suter, your host, and these videos are all about helping you build a more profitable contracting business, find more time in your day, and reclaim the joy and fun in what you do again. And this video series that I'm sharing with you is a series of interviews that I've done with business owners and leaders who are successful in their own right in the contracting industry and people who I respect quite a bit. And the reason I chose to do this series is because I think that a lot of times we really could benefit from hearing other people's stories and hearing where people have had to break through and where they had a struggle and they overcame that struggle and how did they do that. And to also be able to hear like tips and ideas from other leaders that they have found to be helpful in their own journey and helping them build better businesses and have better lives. I really enjoyed doing these interviews with people. It was really fun hearing their stories, and I'm very excited to share them with you because I think that you're going to get a lot out of hearing from them. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in and we'll share the next story. I'm very excited to be continuing our series on leadership, and I'm so grateful to have my guest here with me today, Jenny Rios with Jenny Rios Homes. Jenny, thank you so much for taking your time to just be here and share. So you and I have known each other for, I looked it up earlier today, since 2014 when we first met each other. And I've so appreciated knowing you and knowing watching you as you've been in different roles during that time. And in the most recent iteration as you running your own business. And I have always admired and appreciated your perspective about leading, whether it's leading teams, leading employees, leading your business, which is why I really wanted to make sure that you were included in this series on leadership, because I just think that you have a lot to share about your perspective. And I really appreciate your perspective about leading people and leading teams. And, you know, you're somebody with such a great amount of clarity in doing what you do. But I also know that, you know, the whole topic of leading and leadership isn't something that we wake up one day and just know how to do, right? It's a muscle that we, you know, that we exercise. And so these questions that I'm going to ask you, you know, we've prepared some questions that we're going to talk about, and we'll just see where the conversation goes as, you know, as we go through them. But again, I just want to say thank you. Thanks for being here and for sharing your perspective and your experience.
Yeah, well, you've been a big part of my journey, so thanks for having me.
So the first question is, what do you feel was one of the greatest lessons that you learned along the way that has shaped you as a leader?
Oh, so many lessons. I don't think there's one specific. I mean, I really personally love learning. So for me, as long as I'm learning, I'm generally very happy. And, you know, certain challenges come with some more learning than others. But I think if you lean into the aspect, if you can figure out how to enjoy the process of learning, it just makes life so much more interesting. And so, you know, there's lots of opportunities to mess up and there's lots of opportunities to grow. And I think over the course of my career, when I'm given the opportunity, I've always picked the option that allows me to learn the most. So, and when I look at the leaders and the other people that I've worked with over my career, I'm really observing and really taking in what they have to offer, you know, their leadership qualities, what I have to learn from them, and figure out how to apply it in an appropriate way, like for what makes sense for me. So,
yeah. It's interesting just in listening what you just said, and is that I think that a lot of times we think that if we're a business owner or leader that like we're supposed to have all the answers. We're supposed to know it all, but it's so not true. And it comes from like when we're willing to like lean into learning and growing and making mistakes, right? Like, and you touched on this, like, I don't know about for you, but I know for me, some of my greatest learning in everything that I've done in my life has come out of some of the biggest breakdowns that I've had, right? Like some of the biggest mistakes I've made. And mistakes are just they're just part of the process of learning and getting better at what we do.
But
Yeah.
you've heard people say fail forward, or, I mean, my version of that is don't lose the lesson. So
Yeah.
like, go for it, like shoot for the moon, go, challenge, go for the challenge. Or when you mess up, like I mess up all the time. That's the beauty of like, you get to reset and start again.
Yeah.
But it's not, I don't think of it as a failure. I think of it as, oh, I'm still figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
And so that sort of takes the pressure off. It doesn't have to be quite so serious all the time. I try to keep it light. Like I go after some pretty ambitious goals, but at the same time, like I'm trying to enjoy myself in the process.
Yeah. 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 And I don't think that any of us have it all figured out. I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday, and they reminded me that I have said to them often over the years, before breakthrough is breakdown. And it's like, so when we have those breakdowns, it's just an opportunity to look at it, as you're talking about, like it's just an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to learn. It doesn't mean that we're flawed, because we all make mistakes, right? We all, and it is the thing that allows us to grow and learn from it. Yeah. So the next question is, leading well takes discipline. What do you feel are the essential elements or practices for being a good leader that you feel have helped you in your leadership journey as you've grown as a leader? Like, are there certain disciplines or certain practices that you have that you go, it helps keep me sort of on track or on point or focused in the right direction?
Well, I have at least one vision board every year where I post it somewhere where I can see, and I'm like, this is what I'm going after this year. And whether it's a word or a vision or specific goals or metrics, like I have all that stuff. But beyond that, I continue to do professional development. I continue to have mentors and check in with people that I respect. And so it's like, that's just part of my daily, that's part of my regular practice is I maintain relationships with people that I have a lot of respect for. And I try to just keep it fresh. Like I get really bored very easily. So for me, it's like, I sort of if I don't push myself, I find I'm not as happy. So that's what I do. But I'm always taking a class, or I'm always trying to learn something different, and it just makes life more interesting.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I think that so two things. One is this concept of learning and always being a learner. I've heard from a number of people that I've talked to, and I know that's true for me too, like how I feel like it keeps things fresh and it keeps it interesting, but it also keeps me moving into a new area that keeps me intrigued and keeps me feel like I'm moving forward. But also this thing about like getting bored. I love that you just call it like it is. Because I see this with a lot of business owners, and they want to like sort of make themselves wrong about it. But it's also part of, I think, a little bit of the business owner DNA that there's this thing of, I want to keep like that ability to be able to think big picture or think outside of the box, or to be able to be creative and stretch and grow. Because it's also like, it takes a lot to have, like, it takes a lot of courage to be a business owner, right? Like, I don't think that we wake up one day and have that. Well, I think some people do have it a little bit in their DNA about, being able to be a business owner. And it takes a lot of courage to do it. And there's this element that, sometimes I hear finance people talk about like business owners who are like, they're like all over the place, but it's also a little bit of that all over the place that is the willingness to take risks and that willingness to stretch and grow. But also that there's this desire to always keep doing that is as you term it, like I get bored, but I do hear this from a lot of business owners that there's that desire to have it be fresh and interesting. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that it's, rather than look at it like it's a flaw, that I think that it's actually a good thing. And it can be better when it's harnessed, right? When there's some direction to it, or some purpose to it. And so do you agree with that? Do you think, like, based on?
Yeah, I mean, there's aspects of business that can be very monotonous and that, I mean, my business of construction management, if I only focused on budget and schedule, and I only focused on like these black and white metrics, like that just, it's great that we do all of that. But for me, it's way more interesting to build relationships with people that I respect, and to continually be innovating and preventing problems, and like serving clients in a better way. And to me, like that's way more interesting. And to the extent that I can continue to learn and continue to grow, I can do my job much better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will say, there was somebody that I met with a long time ago, and this was a superintendent of a school district. And we had like a laugh-a-thon one day where we were just like in his office and with a group of people, and we were just laughing hysterically. And he said, when people are having fun, they're really giving their best, and they're really like, that's progress. And like, I just remember it so distinctly. Like we had a blast, and we got so much done. And I just think that when people are enjoying their work and enjoying their relationships, they really rise to be the best.
Yeah. And I know you focus on that. Like you look for ways to bring that into how you run your business, which I think is awesome. Because it doesn't all have to be serious. Yeah. Yeah. And fun is way more fun just in general.
Yeah.
When you're doing anything. And like you say, I would agree with that. Like my experience too is when I'm having fun, I enjoy whatever it is that I'm working on or with. Yeah. Way more. So do you have a philosophy that you would say about about how you manage a project or your business that's like the guidepost for how you coordinate with others or take action? Do you have like this is really important to me in terms of how I approach running my business or running projects, or with your team, that is this, like I call it, and I know you've heard me use this expression, like the stake in the ground. Like, this is really important to me, and this is sort of my orienting way of approaching how I do whatever I do.
For me, like integrity is really important, so that has to be there. And it's not like, that's obviously not a metric that you can measure, but generally speaking, and this is very loose, but generally speaking, I gravitate towards smart, kind people. And so for me, like my clients are generally very smart, very kind people. The people that I assemble, when I assemble teams, I'm looking for really smart, kind people. And I realize that might not be very black and white for a lot of people, but if somebody's not listening, or if they're not engaged, or if they're just have generally poor judgment, like I'm not gonna wake up and over deliver for that client. Like, and if you're taking shortcuts that are really at the not benefiting the project or the people on the project, and if it's I'm just not interested. So I'm very clear about my commitments, and I sort of declutter those projects and those clients, because if I can't wake up every day and get excited about a project, I'm not going to do my best, and I'm just not into it. So for me, it's like, if that means that my business doesn't grow in volume, I'm totally fine with that.
Nice. I really appreciate that. And I know this is true about you because I've heard you say this before. Can you just speak a little bit more? Because I think about this whole how you choose to work with clients who are, you said, smart and kind. Yes?
Yeah.
So, and I also heard you say, like, there's a little bit about noticing their behavior when they're not certain things. what are some ways, like, can you just share a little bit more about like, what does that look like and how do you know and how do you determine that? Because I think that there's a lot of times when I see contractors who will like just assume that they have to take what shows up and maybe are not as intentional as they could be about really seeking out the ideal clients to work with. And you are very intentional about both of those things, about, like you just said, like you'll walk away from a project rather than work with somebody that you have to slog through and hate working with for a year and a half. And or the other side of it too is that you are very, and I know this about you, you're very intentional about how you pursue finding clients. And so can you speak to maybe both of those? Speak to how are you very intentional, or just how are you very intentional about deciphering those people who are smart and kind, and how do you how are you intentional in how you market to find those people?
It's very telling when somebody, you can tell when somebody's, what type of questions they're asking and what's the genesis of the question.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, like if somebody says something along the lines of, well, can't you just, how do we get everybody to work for less? Like, wrong question. That's the wrong question.
Yeah.
That's a yellow flag. So there's different grades of like bad questions, or if they're just simply not listening. And if you're not listening, I can't help you. Like, you should call somebody else. I'm not your person. And if you're like so smart that you're smarter than everybody else in the room, then do it yourself. You don't need me. I'm not your person. So like it's you can just tell, and I can tell very early on, and occasionally it happens where I give everybody the benefit of the doubt and I want to think, like, oh, they just don't know any better. But I will let go of clients. Like if it's not a good fit, I just say, you know what, you can do this on your own. I usually refer them to somebody else, or I don't like just drop them. I just say, this is not a good fit for either of us for these reasons. And I'll just declutter. But it's really like, it's not worth my time and energy. And I'm really like, I have a lot of talent and a lot of value. So I know my self-worth, and I know what my value is. And my value is exponentially higher when I'm really motivated to work on a project. If I'm waking up every day, or if I have to write like an email that takes an hour that should take 5 minutes because I have to choose my words so carefully because they can't, I can't have an open, honest, transparent conversation with somebody. It's just like, that's not how I want to live. And I just choose something different. So I'm just really clear about it. And
yeah, sounds like I'm sorry, go ahead, say that last part again. I cut you off.
It just makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, it's super stressful when you're in working with people who you don't feel like you can honestly, openly communicate with, right? And then it just makes it uncomfortable. Or I appreciate what you said about having to choose your words very carefully and be very methodical or purposeful. And well, we want to be mindful and purposeful in any communication, not having to feel like you're stepping on eggshells with somebody or having to work double hard just to, not upset the apple cart, so to speak. Then I appreciate that you look for, all right, paying attention to those early signs, which is, are they listening? Do they think they're the smartest person in the room? Like, are they somebody I feel good about working with, that I can communicate easily with? How do you find those people? Like, what do you like? Because I know you're intentional about how you do what you do. So how do you find those people?
I don't advertise. I have like strategic partnerships with people that are also, at the best, doing their best work. Most of my work is referral based. I'm in the profession of solving problems. So I'm going to solve problems all day. Things are going to get hard. You want to be working with people that are level-headed and not reactive and not losing their don't have a hot temper and not making, like, anybody with a hot temper, like, I'm not your person. Like,
Yeah.
if you can't keep it together, I'm out.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have a bad day.
Sure.
You can have a bad day. That's fine. I can accept that. But if you're like, your normal default is to just lose your cool and yell at people, like, that just shows that you don't have the ability, you don't have the emotional intelligence for.
I was just thinking the words emotional intelligence when people can't, like, hold it together, and that their mode of communication is, if I just scream loud enough or, grouse loud enough, that you'll pay attention to me. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, generally most of my clients are referrals from other really good people. So
Great. Yeah. So find good clients and then get referrals from good clients that you like to work
well,
with.
that's the thing. Like, if you have great clients, you can just over deliver for them all day long.
Yeah.
Right?
Because you want to, right?
Yeah, you want to. It feels really good and they deserve it. And you want to just, like, I would just work for them all day, every day, because it feels so good to help great people.
Yeah. And doesn't it include, like, an element, like, even as I hear you say that, like, that there's this element of that there are people who are takers in the world and people who are gracious and kind and givers in the world. And what do I mean by that? Like, I think about, like, the people who are tough to work with or work to have as clients or even work with, period, are people who, like, are very demanding and want to take, but don't want to give as much, in terms of, like, taking responsibility for their end of the arrangement or their end of the agreement or that relationship. And like-minded people hang out with them, with other, people like to hang out with people who are like-minded, right? So the more you find clients who are, who listen well, who communicate well, who, are kind and smart, as you say, are people who tend to, give you referrals of better clients. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my clients also have a record of philanthropy. I mean, we're building houses over $5 million. So these are, a very select group of people. They're generally very gracious and they understand that they're in a fortunate situation. So I'm not saving lives. Like, we're building luxury houses in the most, in the best way that we can. So generally, people with means, not all people, but many of my clients, if not all of my clients, are very generous and very kind people. And they've reached a point in their life when their respect, they give a lot of respect, they listen, they're very sophisticated, gracious people.
Mm-hmm.
That's not always the case, but if that's not the case, then I'm generally not your person.
Yeah. 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 And to just, I'm going to tie it together, because as I'm listening to you right now, like, from the very first question that I asked you, there is an intentionality that you have, that you're clear about. Who do I want to work with? What kind of person they are? What kind of project it is? What kind of, what is important to me in terms of the work that I'm doing and who I'm doing it with. So, like, I know you set financial goals and you have a trajectory for what you want to get accomplished, which is a guidepost for you, but also you're very intentional about who you work with. And, so I think that as I listened to you and, this whole thing of who do you work with, and being able to attract those right clients is the first thing that you did. I know is you defined who that was, right? You got really clear for yourself, because if we want to attract the ideal person to work with, right? Who are the people that we really want to be able to do our best work with, that we enjoy working with, that value our contribution, is to be clear for ourselves, first of all, who are they?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's, when we're setting goals, it's really important in terms of the work and who we're working with to also set goals about those things.
I mean, I should say I'm I'm at the stage in my career when I'm very fortunate that I can be so selective. And I realize that that's a luxury and not everybody has that luxury. But if you really are clear about who your target market is and how you can really over deliver for them, it makes it so much easier.
Yeah. Well, and I also think that when you're really clear about who your target market is, though, and, tell me what you think, but like it alters, like, who am I talking to? Where am I marketing? Where am I doing business development? Who are those great referral partners for me? Where do those people come from? And as you said, referrals are golden from the clients that you have liked working with the best, but there's other things that we do in marketing that I think when we're really clear about who that ideal client is, it will inform how we do outreach to attract more of those people. Don't you think?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was a period of time when I tried to serve a variety of different clients, and you just narrow and narrow and narrow. You can see what makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. That comes from experience and learning. And yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That goes back to that. Yeah. How do we learn from mistakes? Like,
Yeah.
I did that once and I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah. Just don't lose the lesson. Just
Yes.
keep learning.
Yes. Yes. All right.
Yeah.
Last question. What piece of advice would you have for newer business owners or managers at the beginning of their leadership journey?
Well, I think to the extent that you can surround yourself with the most qualified people you can afford, like building your team, be very selective about who you work with. And I think if something's not working, you have to address it. You can't just let it sit and hope that it's going to work out on its own. So
I'm so glad you said that, because I think that you are somebody who's great at having hard conversations. And I have such respect and admiration for your willingness to lean in. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Because it's what you're talking about, like when there's an issue, like address it, don't wait. And my words are, you're willing to lean into hard conversations, because like a lot of times we'll avoid a conversation with an employee or somebody when something isn't working, because we're afraid, they'll get upset or they'll get defensive or they'll leave, especially as, in times when it's hard to find people. How do you navigate that in a way that can you just talk a little bit more about that? Because I have my philosophy about how that can work, but I want you to share, because I think you're really great at this.
I think it's hard. I think, of course, I'm human and I really care. I generally really care about people. And when I really care but at the same time, like I'm really trying to solve the problem. So if you just approach it as, this is a challenge, this is an issue, this is a problem, what is the root cause of the problem? Not a symptom of the problem, but really what is the root cause of the problem? Mm-hmm. And really try to focus on solving the problem. And, people are messy. Sometimes it doesn't work. It's not quite that easy, but I do believe that if you've established trust with somebody, you can really just talk openly about what the issues are. And some people, I've dealt with so many issues over my career, and they get really reactive, or, oh, well, and it will say, well, that's not what we talked about. So let's just revisit, where we started and where we are and what some potential next steps are. And I don't know, it just doesn't bother me so much. I don't get super wrapped up in the emotional part of it. I really just try to focus on the problem, but not everybody has that skill. Mm-hmm. And people can get very emotional.
Well, I think sometimes the emotion part of it comes in when there's an issue and we don't address it. And then we wait and we wait and we wait. And then what it does is it builds up our own frustration, irritation. And then we go into a conversation where we're real emotional, and then it creates that upset, right?
That's a simmer to boil.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So when it, and the more you can, part of that thing when you were talking about building trust, I think building trust comes from, we have open, honest conversations, frequently. And it's about what's working and what's not working, not necessarily always about, what isn't working, because I think sometimes as leaders tend to focus on that. But I think you're really good at doing both of those things, like focusing on what's working and not working, and you communicate about those things, right? And I think that's the way that makes those more difficult conversations, when they do have to happen, there's already built in and established trust for, yeah, we've been talking about this. It's not all of a sudden, I didn't wait till I got really upset.
Certainly I have room for improvement. I feel like I could do more positive reinforcement. Like I probably don't give as many good strokes or positive strokes as, I'm like, where's the weakest? I'm looking for like the weakest link and how to solve for the weakest part. But I could definitely improve on like being more vocal about things that are working. I sort of
I get that. Yeah, but I think that's what we do, right? We tend to focus on like, all right, what's not working? It's like, well, how can I improve it? How can I make it better? Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that's true for me too. Sometimes like I have to really stop and go, all right, like focus on what's good, what's working, and give that good feedback to your team, as opposed to looking for, all right, what do we have to change? What do we have to improve?
Yeah.
Jenny, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. Any final thoughts that you want to share with people before we close?
I don't know. I think life is short. You got to just enjoy the process. You can't take yourself so seriously. Just like do the best that you can. There's a saying I will leave with this one final note. There was a yoga teacher I had once that said, you're in a really difficult pose and you could just white knuckle your way through it, and you could just like hold the pose and grit your teeth and, just really, or you could do the same exact pose and just breathe. And it's still the same pose. And one of them is just much more enjoyable.
Nice. So, I love that. That's great. And having done yoga a bit in my life, I totally relate to that.
Yeah.
But that's true, right? It's just true about life in general. It's still going to be here. And then how do we be with it and breathe through it? Well, thank you. Great closing thoughts. So thank you again for being here. And for everybody who's listening or watching today, thank you for joining us in this series on leadership. And I look forward to seeing you next time on The Profit Builder.
Thanks, Vicki.
Thanks, Jenny.
Have a great day.